We're going to call this meeting to order now at 6:41 on February 6th, 2023. And this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. If the Spanish language interpreters, Talia and Luisa, could give the information in Spanish language interpretation, that would be wonderful. Talia or Luisa.
Muy buenas noches a todos. Esto es una reunión pública de la Comité de la Policía. Es las 6:41 de la noche y vamos a empezar esta reunión, y esta reunión va a ser grabada y también vamos a tener interpretación disponible en español.
Thank you so very much. Yes, and now the Spanish language interpretation is available at the little globe down on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Andrea and Amanda. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another forms of means of assistance. But please note that this is an automatic captioning service and it's not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon state law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to ask questions using Zoom's Q&A feature. As the commissioners are presenting and are discussing things, if attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings and agenda items. I'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and the answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of your screen. Now I would like to turn the meeting over to the co-chairs of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. We acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetrated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair Tirsa. So appreciate that. I'm going to take us into the community agreements and ask that we read each slide silently. And then on the third slide, I'll be asking for agreeing to the agreements. So please feel free to read these to yourself. Next slide, please. Part 2. And slide, please, 3, please. So if you notice that a conversation is coming close to violating a community agreement, please call your fellow commissioner members in gently and with compassion. If you are called in, please take a moment to consider how you can best participate in the space while still respecting the community agreements and making space for everyone. Do we all commit to following the community agreements that are outlined here today? And if so, may I see some sort of acknowledgement? Thank you. Thank you so much. Beautiful. I'm now going to pass this meeting back over to our wonderful co-chairs, Ajay, Tirsa, and Christian, to go through the timeline, please.
This meeting is part of the Police Accountability Commission's powers and duties phase of work, which focuses on the functions of the new system. Future phases of work will develop the form of the new system, as well as how it relates to the rest of city government, and the transition plan from our current plan to the new one. The commission will present all proposed changes to the city council in 2023 for their consideration and approval. This slide shows the outcome documents for the powers and duties phase based on the agenda and scope of work, scope approved by the commission. The commission has completed its work on the areas of agreements on access to information. The commission has received a referred draft for areas of agreement on structural oversight and begun discussing it. It has also received a referred draft for areas of agreement on officer accountability, but has not yet started discussing it at the full commission. Next slide, thanks. This slide is the current project plan for the powers and duties phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It will be updated as needed throughout this phase. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase, which focuses on identifying areas of agreement among commission members as to the functions of the new system. Today's meeting is part of the blue box with the red border near the upper right corner of the screen. Okay, following today, here are the upcoming meetings of the Police Accountability Commission. Specifically, we'd like to highlight the full commission meets this Thursday, February 9th, to conclude this phase of work. If the PAC is unable to finish this Thursday, it will also meet next Monday, February 13th. But this meeting may be canceled if all tasks associated with this phase of work are completed this week. And there is no meeting on Monday, February 20th, as the city observes President's Day. Thanks. Oh, wait. So one more thing. We have today's meeting agenda includes working through the draft areas of agreement on structural oversight, flagging items for further discussion, resolving items, and if possible, approving the final document as the PAC area of agreement on structural oversight. All document approval processes include a review of the PAC values and goals and hearing public comment on the specific document. Following this, the subcommittee on officer accountability will present the draft areas of agreement on officer accountability, and the commission will hold a discussion on this, if possible, approving the final document as the PAC areas of agreement on structural oversight. It isn't expected that this document will also be complete today, but a first pass through the document would be ideal. The PAC will also discuss draft definitions of 2 of the terms council has mandated that the commission define: accountability and independent judgment. There are also some phase of work transition conversations and an open public comment period on the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you so much. We're now going to start discussing the draft PAC areas of agreement on structural oversight. I would like to now pass it over to co-chairs Debbie and Faith to explain the document.
Hello, everybody. I'm co-chair Debbie, she, her, one of the commission members. My co-chair Faith is away today, so I will lead the discussion on the structural oversight areas agreement. First, I want to thank co-chair Faith and then the rest of the committee, Commissioners Ajay, Casey, Sophia and Angie. So yeah, we worked as a team, and hopefully this is in pretty good shape. We did leave a few things kind of unsettled for the full commission to decide on, just in the interest of getting this to you all sooner rather than later. So I think if you could put it up on the screen now, we can work our way through it.
I'm going to ask that we be facilitated like we normally do. Please be brief each time you speak, and even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitated, and remember we're using a weighted stack. And please be forward-looking. So that's all I wanted to say. So Debbie, here you go. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
So as a reminder, the structural oversight topic really mostly covers how the new board will interact with the police bureau in the city on policy matters. And so here, I don't know if we need to read the table of contents, but here's the table of contents. And then there was one thing you might want to keep. Can you go back to the definitions? One thing when we're going through this, if anybody notices anything else that we should have in the definition section, please speak up, because this was the only thing really that we felt was would really should be in there, because this is kind of a sort of a new concept for Portland, this idea of sentinel event reviews, which are forward-looking root cause reviews of undesirable police-related outcomes designed to allow for the development of recommendations for preventing reoccurrence through continuous process improvements. And it's just described further in the full document. Okay, so I guess I appreciate if somebody wants to give me some advice. Am I just supposed to actually read all the words in this and then pause for yes, no, changes? Yes. Okay, good, got it. Okay, so the oversight board, the board, shall have the authority to make recommendations to the Portland Police Bureau and City Council on Bureau policies, practices, directives, and training. To facilitate this work, the Oversight Board shall have staff dedicated to policy work. This document outlines how policy recommendations are initiated, presented, adopted, and implemented. The public will have the opportunity to comment on all policy recommendations during development and before adoption. So are we asking if anybody's okay, if people are okay with this, or should we just move on?
You're asking the question, you're just giving people like a couple of seconds, and then you can say, can we move on if people have
Okay,
not, yeah.
all right.
respond.
Okay, thanks. So if anybody has anything they'd like to, any concerns or questions about this, otherwise, if you're ready, we will move on.
Or I can do it, Debbie, whatever you
Oh,
feel.
I don't mind doing it. I just wanted to make sure I was, I got to get back in the rhythm here, So, so please interrupt and remind me, Dr. Moses, if I'm missing the boat.
You betcha, you got it. Not a-
Okay. So are we ready to move on? Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so the first section then is initiation of policy recommendation process. Policy recommendation contents. A policy recommendation shall identify the body to which the policy change is being recommended. For example, Portland Police Bureau, City Council, the mayor. A recommendation will include an outline of the new policy or policy change being recommended. The recommendation will direct the board staff on any additional action it considers necessary to advocate for the policy change. For example, advocating with elected officials, convening stakeholder groups, etc. So any questions or concerns about this particular section? Okay, shall we move on? Give me a little, somebody. Great, thank you. Okay. So next, scope of authority in formulating policy recommendations. The Oversight Board shall have the authority to engage in independent analysis of police data related to any police practices or procedures. The board may access city audit records. The board may review current policies and propose new policies or modifications to existing policies based on any information or materials they deem relevant. The board may make policy recommendations based on individual misconduct cases. The board may make policy recommendations based on its review of complaints and closed misconduct investigations. The board will have the authority to hire independent experts when needed. The board shall have the authority to review training materials and attend trainings for Bureau employees for the purposes of formulating recommendations. So this sentence that's highlighted, we included it, and then the city attorney told us that, I'll explain this. So the number of board members observing training sessions should be fewer than a quorum. So it's our understanding that these training sessions are primarily behind closed doors. And so there was a concern that if we had more than a quorum, then that should be a public meeting. But then it turns out if everybody wanted to go, it would be okay, because as long as there was no deliberation going on, the full board could actually attend a training session just to learn and observe. And then if they wanted to talk about it and decide on policy recommendations, they would need to do that in one of their open public meetings. But it would be, so in other words, we do not need this sentence in here. And so, it looks like there's a hand raised.
I don't see that. Okay. Oh, yes, Commissioner Dan, yes.
Hi, Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the commission. And we don't need to have this in here, but if we're trying to promote transparency and trust with the community, and we're sending our board to meet with the police behind closed doors as a full body, as a full board, even if they're saying they're not doing any deliberations, I think it'd be wise for us to put this in anyway, so that they have to do those trainings with less than a full quorum there, so that we can not only discourage discussions going on, but make it so that they, even if they have such discussions, that they can't affect the outcomes. So my suggestion is to leave the language in, regardless of whether we need it or not.
Chair, any comments on that from other commissioners? Okay, so then I need to, Dr. Moses, I need to be reminded now, does anybody have any objections to leaving that in? Is that what I should say next?
Yeah, you actually don't need to ask because it is.
It's already there.
It's already there, so you
Okay,
don't have to
good. Well,
ask.
that's easy. Okay.
So you can ask, can we move on?
Are we ready to move on? Can we move on? Do a little finger. Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Tierce. I see you. Okay. Okay, good. So now we're on section B.
Beautiful.
Policy recommendations may be initiated through at least 6 processes. The board may also identify additional entry points. B1, board member proposal. A board member may suggest a policy recommendation. And then skip over that purple sentence and then go on to, with the support of at least one other board member, board members and or staff shall prepare a proposed policy recommendation for consideration by the board. So we ended up capturing the thought that members of the public may suggest proposed policy recommendations to the board for its consideration. We captured that in B2. And so if people do not have an objection to this, I'd suggest that we take that out. And because again, B2 covers that. So does anybody have any problem with removing that sentence from that first B1?
We want to see, yeah.
Okay, so, whoops.
We need to ask if there's general agreement to do.
Oh, is there a general agreement with taking that sentence out?
I see general agreement.
Okay, yay. All right, so then B2, community member proposals. The board will have methods for members of the public to suggest proposed policy recommendations to the board for its consideration. With the support of at least 2 total board members and or staff shall prepare a proposed policy recommendation for consideration by the board. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about this method for public involvement? Okay, shall we move on?
Yes, I see agreement, yes.
Okay, agency policy review, initiation and auditing. Board staff may also initiate policy review, including through auditing completed misconduct cases. If the board staff initiates a policy review on its own, it shall inform the board and invite participation throughout the process, including submitting a proposed policy recommendation to the board for approval. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about B3? Okay. Shall we move on?
I see people saying yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, B4. Oh, there it is. Okay. During its investigation of complaints and determination of findings, the board may, in addition to findings specific to the officer and complaint, determine systemic findings, for example, a policy failure. So this highlighted phrase here, the concern was it's in the passive voice, and so wanted to change the wording so it says, when the board finds a systemic issue, the board will automatically initiate a policy review in which board members and/or staff shall prepare a proposed policy recommendation for consideration by the board. Does anybody have any objection to rephrasing that first part of the sentence?
I do not see any objection.
Okay, then I'll finish reading the section before we do the general agreement, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but
Yeah, that's fine.
seems sensible. Okay,
We'll go back. Yep.
thank you. Yeah, sorry. Okay, so blah, 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 blah. Okay, when the board finds a policy in need of prompt attention, it may forward its recommendation directly to the Bureau. So are there any strong objections to this revised paragraph? Okay, is there general agreement with this paragraph the way it's written?
I see general agreement.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yep.
Uh-oh. Looks
Nope.
like a hand is raised.
Dan. Commissioner
Oh, thank
Dan.
you. I just want to point out to the commission that one reason this is a really important, this last sentence is really important, is that right now, the police review board, which meets behind closed doors, can make a recommendation right to the Bureau based on one case, and then the Bureau has accepted about 90% of those recommendations. So it's really important to give the new board that same authority. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, B5, reviews of undesirable police-related incidents. So this ties back to that Sentinel event review that we have in the definition section. The board may initiate forward-looking root cause reviews of undesirable police-related outcomes and develop recommendations for preventing reoccurrence through continuous process improvements. The review may involve representatives from law enforcement, the judicial branch, forensics, board members, civil rights lawyers, members of the public, and other relevant participants. The panel will take public comment throughout the process. The board will issue a report at the conclusion of the review, which may include a proposed policy recommendation. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about that section?
Commissioner Monica.
My only concern about that is, do we have to put somewhere that this is not the initial review of the incident? This is an additional layer of investigation so that somebody that is being asked to come in to answer questions doesn't say, I've already done that, I don't need to come in. Does that make sense? Do we need to do that or not? I'm not sure.
So believe me, I'm no expert on this. I researched Seattle and they do this. But my sense is that this was sort of more of a big picture thing. Like the example they used in Seattle was that they had some pretty significant demonstrations in the city that, things didn't go as well as one might have hoped. And so they actually did one of these big reviews. And so it just feels like it's a much bigger picture thing than an individual case. But again, I'm just speaking from my understanding of after reading the information in Seattle. Maybe somebody else knows more about this and has something to offer. I don't see any hands right now. So maybe though we could put a little parenthetical thing about these. This is
Commissioner,
a supplement to individual case reviews or case investigations.
Commissioner Dan, and then Commissioner Ajay.
Okay, well, first, I appreciate the parenthetical. It doesn't even have to be in parentheses. I think it should just be there. I like that idea. Second of all, I'm flipping through my printout of this, where it says proposed policy recommendation. Does that envision that proposed policy recommendation can include more than one recommendation, or should we make that plural at the end of the sentence?
I was wondering that too when I read it out loud. It seems to me, yeah, we should say may include proposed policy, or maybe even just say may include policy recommendations. I mean, they're proposed until somebody adopts them, so just change it to be that.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie, Commissioner Ajay, and then Commissioner Angie.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to note, and I don't know if this makes a difference or not, but with the Sentinel event reviews, it's kind of like basically on this idea that there's sort of an organizational error, right? So it's like bigger than one person, even though there is like individuals being like interviewed, as Commissioner Debbie said, like kind of big picture. Yeah, so because it's this kind of like organizational thing, like I'm assuming that the timeline will be maybe a little bit different, and this is a complete assumption. So like, I'm assuming that investigations of individuals will be happening sort of like first, and after all of those outcomes have been determined and like all angles have been really exhausted, you know, in terms of the actual investigation, then that's when the Sentinel event review comes in. Like once we kind of know what the facts are, we know that like mistakes had been made, and like, because the point of the Sentinel event review is not to blame individuals. So presumably, if there was blame to be had, that would have already happened, because the Sentinel event review is not that. It's looking at like, okay, what do we do to like make this organization better? That is not about necessarily like punishing the individual. So my presumption is that if there are individuals that are warranting some kind of, you know, investigation or something like that, that will happen beforehand. And that the Sentinel event review would happen after all of, you know, the investigations have occurred. But of course, you know, staff or whoever might know more, feel free to interject.
Thank you, Commissioner Ajay, Commissioner Angie, and then staff.
Staff can go first because mine is kind of more of a general. I'd like to have this defined just a little bit better, I think, but I don't know what that is, Debbie, and I'm sorry that I'm bringing this up at the last moment because
Angie, what do you want to find?
The Sentinel review or the Sentinel review, the event type. So it maybe in the definition, I can't see it right now, I'm sorry, but maybe the board, it says the board may initiate forward thinking, let's see, I'm so sorry. All right, forward thinking root cause review, cause reviews of undesirable police related outcomes, and maybe saying overall systemic undesirable police related outcomes or something to that. I'm not sure. Systemic undesirable police related outcomes. I'm not sure what the word is that I'm looking for or the phrase, but I think that this needs to be defined just a little bit clearer, but I'll let staff talk. And I also have a question, is policy recommendations, is that supposed to be capitalized, the P and the R? I'm not sure about that, but anyway, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Angie. Staff?
Yeah, thank you. So first off, everything that Commissioner Jay and Debbie said about what a Sentinel event review is accurate, not only for Seattle, but also for the DOJ and under the National Institutes of Justice, their definition as well, which is linked in the chat, at least as far as I'm aware. The one thing that may be helpful is with relation to the timeline is that depending on the duration of time after an event in which a member of the public could file a complaint, that could delay the start of an investigatory period that might involve the interviews that are related to the complaint being, you know, a year or something after the event. And if it's a large enough scale event to be considered a Sentinel event, that Sentinel event review could theoretically start earlier. That's not as likely, but it is possible. So these could be parallel or it could go in either order. The most likely scenario is, as mentioned, that it would be that a complaint investigation would likely happen first, but not necessarily. And then with relation to policy recommendations, the way the document is written has it capitalized everywhere as of right now, and where it's proposed by the board. So after the board is done with it, it becomes a proposed policy recommendation. So that's how it's written right now. That language could be changed across the entire document possibly, of course, but the way it's written right now has it as capitalized and as a particular thing, a proper noun.
Thank you so much, staff, for all of that.
I noticed Commissioner Dan put a suggestion for a lead into that that covers Commissioner Monica's concern about wanting to make sure it's distinct from the individual investigation. So perhaps if everyone looks at that and maybe we could add that in.
And that's in the chat.
Yeah, I think it's the most recent thing in the chat, I think.
I'm going to read it. Following the completion of an investigation regarding individual officer misconduct and any related disciplinary action being proposed, the board may initiate forward-looking root cause reviews of systemic undesirable police-related outcomes.
Okay, so
Commissioner Angie.
I also might suggest that we say, separate from the completion of it, or we could say separate from the completion of an investigation instead of saying following the completion of an investigation, just in case the timing is, is during for some weird reason.
Commissioner Casey.
I was just going to agree with what Commissioner Angie just said. She beat me to it. I think that making not boxing in saying we have to complete the individual investigations before a Sentinel event review can be commenced is a good idea. I think I'm thinking particularly about something like the 2020 protests, where you could potentially have hundreds of individual complaints that would need to be resolved, when really you need to be reviewing the overall policy failures as soon as possible on something like that.
Thank you, Commissioner Casey.
okay, so now I'm just going to read out just the first few lines because we can hear how it sounds. Separate from an investigation regarding individual officer misconduct and any related disciplinary action being proposed, the board may initiate forward-looking root cause reviews of undesirable systemic police-related outcomes and develop recommendations for preventing reoccurrence through continuous process improvements. Okay, does that, I see a hand.
Commissioner Dan.
Yeah, I just have one suggestion. I think with the word systemic should be moved after root cause. So forward-looking root cause systemic reviews, because the undesirable police-related outcome is an undesirable outcome, whether it's systemic or based on the individual officers, right?
Debbie, does that work for you?
Oh, that sounds good.
I'm sorry, did you say before or after root cause? Apologies.
Then after.
Thank you.
So root cause systemic reviews. Yeah. Good.
I'm watching Commissioner Tomlinson to see if she agrees.
Okay, good. So I feel like I read the part that we made the significant changes to and did the rest already. So does anybody have any objections to how this is written in its current form?
Commissioner Monica.
I'm still feeling like I want to say somewhere that participation, if you are asked to participate in a Sentinel event review, that this is not something that you can just bow out of.
This is what say
that is not something that you can just bow out of and say, look, I've already
Oh.
answered my questions, right? So maybe if we just put a sentence after the review may involve representatives from law enforcement, judicial branch, forensics, board members, civil rights, if someone is asked to participate, this participation is not optional. I mean, no. Do you see where I'm getting at? I want people to feel like they have to be there if they're needed.
So then, does that mean then that you would have a subpoena power, or whatever the, it's called when you know, force somebody to come?
I'm gonna go to staff.
Just to clarify for Commissioner Monica, is the question whether or not a person would be obligated to participate in the Sentinel event review itself, or if,
Mhm.
or, okay. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Clarifying.
I've been involved in a few reviews in events that happen in healthcare, and sometimes people just don't come, and it's not helpful.
Is this, Commissioner Debbie, the place to do that? Is this the comment to do this in?
Sorry, I can't hear you. Can you say it again a little louder?
Yeah, Commissioner Debbie, is this the place to put that type of comment?
I
Commissioner
guess if we're addressing Sentinel event reviews, we want to be able to force people to come and participate, then I don't know if this is something that the city attorney would have to answer. I have no idea if you can force people to come and participate in these, and what kind of authority the people who are convening this, the board would have to make that happen. So I'm sorry.
So I'm gonna go to staff, and then I'm gonna highlight what Commissioner Casey said in chat. Go ahead, staff.
Yeah, I think I'm not an expert on this process, but I'm not familiar as in reading around, and maybe if anyone else can too, if there are any examples of Sentinel event reviews that relate to police and policing anyway. This is a phrase that's used in other contexts as well, in which participation is not optional. And so that might be sort of a separate question. And perhaps the city attorney could, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but if there is any information that could be shared about whether or not this is something that a board member could request, that the board could implement with some sort of requirement or not, if there are any legal ramifications of that, that might be helpful. But
Right now, I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah.
You mean promoting Sarah?
At some point, if she's got something, I don't want to put her on the spot right now, but
Yeah.
raise your hand whenever you want. We'll make sure you can talk. Thanks.
Okay, Sarah Ames, welcome in, Deputy Attorney.
Hi, I am, as you all realize, you were briefed by Heidi Brown early in this process, and we have attorneys who go deep on the issue of police discipline and know all of this inside and out. I am not that person. I think at this point, I am not going to give you definitive legal advice, but I see no obstacle to including this in your areas of agreement, because I think there are a number of areas in these areas of agreement where you state very clearly what you would like to see, what your goals are, what your intent is. And there are some areas where your own legal counsel or legal counsel who's involved in drafting might say, well, you can't do it exactly that way, but this is how you can meet the intent of this section. And I think it's okay for that kind of more fine-tuned legal advice to come a little later in the process, because we obviously can't keep up and don't have Heidi, full-time staffing you, which might be necessary. We don't have your independent counsel on board yet either. So at this point, you do have the power to compel sworn members of the police bureau and to participate in investigations. One of the issues around compelling testimony is the right to avoid self-incrimination. That is not the case in these Sentinel things. So Sentinel event reviews. So I feel comfortable with you putting it in with the caveat that, the fine-tooth legal analysis will come later.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Monica and then Commissioner Dan.
I also like the idea of putting it into the access to information document, which has been mentioned by Casey and a few other people. I think that would be a good place for it.
Very good. Commissioner Dan?
Sorry, were you calling on me?
Yes.
Yeah, something's happening with your audio, I think. Thank you, Dr. Moses. I'm very reluctant for us to put this in here without doing any research on it first, because especially if we're saying that this might happen parallel to or even before an investigation happens, where an officer doesn't know then if what they say is going to be used for the disciplinary process. Where I think where we're trying to get at is really important, to make sure that everybody talks to the people doing the Sentinel event review, which I still don't really like that name, but compelling testimony should be, in my mind, it should be reserved for that specific process, the investigation itself, where you're looking into misconduct, and where basically you're saying if you don't talk, then we're going to fire you. And I'm a little uncomfortable introducing that concept into this systemic review of firing people for not participating in it. So I'm wondering if there's some way we can put language in that flags that for a later discussion without making it a not possibility.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Staff?
That's exactly where I was going to go with that comment, which is the way in which to do that would be, and just keeping in mind that the commission approved back in, and this is a process note, not about the content. In September, the commission approved the barriers and best practices, then circled back to it and made an amendment to add something in. This, if it's a designed to be a potential question about compelling testimony, would be probably something to amend into the access to information document, which was already approved. And that, and doing or not doing any of the changes that are shown on screen right now to this section would not preclude the commission from circling back to that. It's just not really necessarily part of the current conversation. It could be circled back to at the next meeting or whatever the next opportunity is, and added in if the commission wanted.
Thank you. So Commissioner Debbie, there is a question on the table. And can everyone hear me? Or now that I have the headset in? Okay, good, great. Let's accept or reject the changes to the paragraph the way they are presented.
That sounds like a great plan. So so now this is the revised section. Does anybody have any strong objections to this, the way it's written?
I do not see any.
Is there general agreement with the way this is written? And then I'll make a small note then that we're gonna write ourselves a note to keep in mind that idea about can you force people to participate? Okay, so it seems like we're good.
Thank you. Staff, where are we in this document? How much more?
We've got a good pause point after the next one.
Okay, that sounds good.
The long one, and this goes down through G, but they gets shorter. Sorry, I'm scrolling through the citations.
Yeah.
They're actually goes through H, but some of them are very short and just have one subsection. The B is the largest part by far.
Beautiful.
So makes sense to kind of pause, and it'll be over the halfway point.
Wonderful. So
B6, yeah.
We'll keep going. So B6, Debbie, and then we will take a break afterwards.
Okay, so this one we had a little bit of a struggle with, and so the purple one is the one that the way it is now, but then with some side work, we came up with this the green as a replacement. And so I'm going to start by reading the green one, and because this is what I would recommend that we put in here rather than wasting our time reading the other one first. So the Oversight Board may facilitate a process for board and community review and development of Portland Police Bureau policies and directives. This includes engagement in the Bureau's directive review and development process. The board should schedule timelines compatible with the PPB's processes. The board will transmit recommendations on revised and newly proposed policies and directives to PPB for their consideration, with city council having the final say. And as a reminder, the charter gives the oversight board the authority to make recommendations on police bureau policies. And then with the requirement that the bureau respond, and if there's a disagreement, then that disagreement goes to city council for resolution. And so this captures that idea. Are there any questions or concerns about this paragraph?
Commissioner Dan.
Okay, I do not have a question or concern about this paragraph. I was just waiting to see if anybody else jumped in. I came up with some language to add to the previous paragraph while the vote was happening, because I was thinking about it, and then I heard, is everybody okay? And it was too late. So I was suggesting that maybe at the end of B5, we can end in a sentence that says the board may consider provisions to require participation in these reviews. And that way it's in our document, and we can always strengthen it later if we find some research to support it. So let's finish B6, and if you want to, if you're able to, if that's
then we
appropriate.
can roll back and do B5 a little bit more. Okay, sounds good. So does anybody have any questions or concerns about this revised, the green paragraph? And is there general agreement that this paragraph, the way it's written now, is acceptable?
I see agreement.
Okay. And then while we're still in B, let's just go back to B5 and see if people are good with that, adding that sentence that Commissioner Dan suggested. Commissioner Dan, perhaps could you say that out loud again?
Oh, it's in the chat, but I'll do
Okay,
it.
oh, sorry, I can read it then. Hold on, let me find it.
7:28 p.m.
Okay. The board may consider provisions to require participation in these reviews. So are there any objections to adding that sentence to this, to B5?
I'm going to let staff
Oh,
chime
good.
in
Yes,
here.
please.
Yeah, so just to clarify, and this is not a pro or con, but this would mean that the board would then be making a decision later on. You're essentially recognizing the board's authority to do that, which is not necessarily the same thing as having access to information. Talk about guarantee that right now. That's not necessarily a problem. They're slightly different approaches to get to the same thing. Just wanted to flag that they're not exactly the same. That doesn't mean that you should or shouldn't do it. That's of course up to the commission, but just wanted to flag it.
Thank you, staff. Go ahead, Commissioner Debbie.
Okay. All right, so are there any objections to adding this sentence to this paragraph? Is there general agreement that that we leave that sentence in there?
I see agreement.
Okay, so now we're done with B, yay.
Yay. So then let's take 6 minutes and come back at 7:40. Thank you, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to go ahead and come back into the document. Commissioner Debbie, if you would like to continue on to section C, I believe.
Okay, section C, process for board approval of policy recommendations. Potential policy recommendations identified, I wonder if that should be for review, are presented for the board for consideration, discussion, and potential adoption. A proposed policy recommendation shall be placed on the board's agenda for consideration at the next meeting and may be considered or referred to a subcommittee. The board will take input from community members on policy matters while they are under development and before the board votes. Do people agree with me that should be for instead of from on that first line. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so Samir, can you fix that? And then, so other than that, are there any questions or concerns about this paragraph? Is there general agreement that we accept this as it is with that small fix?
We can just, Commissioner Connie.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing.
Oh, you're agreeing. Okay, very good. Yeah. And when we do the grammatical changes, we can, just go ahead and say, can we move on?
Oh, good.
So,
Okay, let's move
yeah.
on. Can we move on? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So now C. Is that the one we're on right now? C1, or are we on?
Yeah, C1.
Okay. Proposed presentation of policy recommendations. Proposed policy recommendations shall be presented to the board, as well as any findings regarding independent analysis, review of training materials, directives, investigations, sentinel event reviews, and agreements that may be necessary to inform the board's decision on the proposed policy recommendation. The board may request whatever additional materials and research it believes is necessary to help make an informed decision on the proposed policy recommendation. Does anybody have any questions or concerns about this particular section? So then I can just say, shall we move on? Yes.
Yes.
Shall we move on?
I see hands. Yes.
Okay. Now this is one where there was some discussion about making words as accessible as possible. So we started with adoption and rescission, and then thought that might be more accessible if it said adopting and rescinding. So I'm going to read it that way, and then we'll see if how people are with the whole section. Adopting and rescinding policy recommendations. The board shall make a formal decision to adopt or not adopt any proposed policy recommendation that is put before it. The board may also make a formal decision to rescind or not rescind previous policy recommendations. Are there any questions and concerns with the way this is written with the somewhat simpler language in the title? Okay. So do we have to say general agreement on this, or can we just ask if we can move on?
We can move on.
Okay, or can we move on?
I see people saying yes.
Okay.
C3.
Okay, C3. Communication of approved policy recommendations. The board shall publish policy recommendation on the board's website and other relevant platforms. So if they wanted to use Twitter or whatever, that would be an option. So any questions or concerns about this one? Okay, shall we move on? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good, thanks. So then D, implementation of policy recommendations. When the board adopts a policy recommendation, the board shall collaborate with staff to coordinate necessary next steps towards implementation. Any questions or concerns about this one? Okay, shall we move on? Okay, D1. Required response from Portland Police Bureau. When the board recommends a change to Portland Police Bureau policy, the chief, after reviewing a policy recommendation, shall respond promptly to the board in writing, but in no event more than 60 days after receipt of the recommendation. The response shall indicate what, if any, I'm going to pause here. So the response shall indicate what, if any, policy or procedural changes are to be made. And then following is a quote from the charter itself. The Portland Police Bureau shall consider and accept or reject all policy or directive recommendations made by the board. If the Portland Police Bureau rejects a policy or directive recommendation, then at the request of the board, city council must consider and vote to accept or reject the policy recommendations received from the board. Council's decision will be binding on the Portland Police Bureau. So does anybody have any questions or concerns about D1? Then shall we move on?
I see people saying yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, D2. City council consideration of policy recommendations. If the chief rejects a recommendation or fails to respond within 60 days after receipt of the recommendation, the board or staff shall place the matter on the council calendar for consideration and a decision by city council within 15 days thereafter. So this is what the first section that is talking about recommendations to the police bureau. The second paragraph, then we're talking about changes to City of Portland policy, which is envisioned in the charter amendment that the board can make recommendations to the city council also on policy matters. So if the board recommends, if we want to see that section, it's down at the bottom at the beginning of the research section, but let me read this first. If the board recommends a change to City of Portland policy or law, the city council shall put the recommended change on the agenda of a public city council meeting for discussion no more than 3 weeks after the receipt of the recommendation. So now we found some issues with this particular section here. For one thing, the first paragraph talks about within 15 days. The second paragraph, although it's a slightly different topic, talks about within 3 weeks. And we were thinking that possibly it would make sense to change the first one to like 15 business days. So then that would indicate, if there was a holiday in there, it could be longer than 3 weeks. And then make the second paragraph consistent with that. So they both say within 15 business days. And
Thank you.
Go
I'm so
ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna let staff in. But you're kind of
Yes,
on a
16.
roll.
Right.
Happy to wait until co-chair. Deb.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Okay. Then the one other thing we talked about was that the charter amendment talks about board recommendations to city council about city policy, but it doesn't mention law. And so thinking that we should get rid of that and law in the second paragraph so that so we're staying consistent with what the charter amendment says. So those are a couple of suggestions, changing both of them to 15 business days and getting rid of the law. And so I welcome discussion from everybody.
Thank you. I'm going to welcome in staff at this moment.
Yeah, so it's section 2-1007B of the city charter, which you can see highlighted here. I'm going to zoom in on it. So this is the section in question there. The questions that were asked to deputy city attorneys, to the city attorney's office, I should say. One was whether or not the second paragraph, as it relates to policy, contradicts the first because of the different timeline, and whether or not in the context of policy it's even necessary because the first paragraph talks about that. The other question that was asked was whether or not the text of the second as it relates to law was within the scope of the oversight board to have it be on the agenda. So that's just to clarify what the question was. And I'm not sure, again, I don't want to put our deputy city attorney, our vice attorney on the spot here, but just wanted to flag that that's what was asked.
Thank you so much. Commissioner Dan.
So, hoping this isn't a major proposal, but the first paragraph, I would have footnoted that the current City Code 3.21.190, which I placed in the chat about IPR, has that almost exact same language about if the chief fails to respond to the Citizen Review Committee currently within 60 days, they can place the matter on the City Council calendar within 15 days. So placing the matter on the council calendar within 15 days means that you're asking them to put it on the calendar, not that you're requiring them to schedule it within those 15 days. And then I hope that makes sense. It'll take 15, as long as 15 days to give that to the city council clerk for its presentation at an agenda. So the second one tells the city council when they should contemplate the item, which I don't know if we can do. So I think maybe it should have the same language in both pieces as I think this through.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan.
That sounds like a good way to go. Right. Well, thank you for that clarification. I have to say, when I saw 15 days, I thought, how can they do that? But what you're saying is that what that means is that it has to be, the council clerk has to take an action of putting it on the camp, but it could be like 6 weeks later, depending upon where there's room on the council calendar. Okay, good. So they have to take some kind of action by then. So, yeah, so do you think it makes sense to say 15 business days, or should we just leave? Because that probably came out of the city code, because that's where I think I found that section. Yeah. So we can just leave it the way it is in the code. And then in the second paragraph, then just copy that same language. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts about that?
Staff?
Yeah, for clarity, if I may suggest, there's a the fact that the within 15 days follows the phrase "a decision by city council" is, I think, what created the confusion there. So if it's possible to potentially put "shall place the matter on the council calendar within 15 days thereafter for consideration decision," just to eliminate that possible confusion there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that helps at all with at least the first part of that problem. And then you're not necessarily that you can, if there's any proposed changes to any other part of it, that's of course totally fine.
Yeah, good. And then if we could put that same way of saying it in that second paragraph, just copy and paste it the same way, or however you, type it.
Commissioner Debbie, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
It says in the charter, I believe it says policy or directives. It doesn't say policy or law. And I'm just wondering where you are.
Well, so I think I suggested that we get rid of "or law."
Okay.
Yeah. In that second paragraph, first line.
Did you get that, staff? Okay.
Yeah, just one thing at a time. Sorry.
Go ahead,
You betcha. You betcha.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Commissioner Monica.
Yeah, this question may be, I would be totally fine with this, but I wonder if this is one of the reasons why our system right now has been weaker than we would want to, that it has to go to city council for for a final decision. I kind of wish it was just in the board, right? That the board has enough power that it doesn't have to refer to the city council. And then the city council is the one that decides at the end. Is that taking away power from the board? And if that's the way it's written in the charter and that's the way and we can't change that, then we can't change that. But I mean, that was what I was going to, where my brain was going to right now.
Commissioner Debbie, and then I'm gonna invite in Sarah Ames.
I think it would be a good idea for all of us to read this paragraph that our staff highlighted for us, because I think this kind of gives us the guidance. And then obviously we should hear from our city attorney to see what kind of ideas she's got about this.
So the board shall have the authority to make policy and directive recommendations to the Portland Police Bureau and City Council. The Portland Police Bureau shall consider and accept or reject all policy or directive recommendations made by the board. If the Portland Police Bureau rejects a policy or directive recommendation, then at the request of the board, City Council must consider and vote to accept or reject the policy recommendations received from the board. Council's decision will be binding on the Portland Police Bureau. And that's from the powers of the board. And then I would like to invite in Sarah Ames.
Hi, I have been involved a bit in some of the policy discussions and the revisions of policy that have to be run by the Department of Justice. And it's a very complicated process, and there's very specific ways that policies have to be written. And I quite imagine that it is not going to be a straight up or down, accept or reject any recommendations by the board. And I'm just wondering if you thought about what a partial adoption would be, what the process is when the Portland Police Bureau says, well, we're going to make these changes to our draft policy based on your recommendations, instead of just adopting your recommendations, and how you're going to, with that feedback, that response, then take that response and then decide how and what to appeal to council. In some ways, it's very much it, and this is in the powers of the board charter language as well. So it's very binary, accept or reject. And it doesn't really kind of leave room for where, if the chief rejects a recommendation, the board shall place the matter on the council calendar. What is the process for deciding what and how to request the council review? At the request of the board, city council must consider. So what does the at the request of the board look like? And how does that get processed? Anyway, it's just an ambiguity and a bit more of a gray area than this straightforward language that the charter suggests.
Thank you so much for your wisdom. Commissioner Dan.
Well, I appreciate the city attorney saying that, because if you look at the language in the charter, I believe that it specifically says they may ask city council, not that they shall. Right? They will have the authority, blah, 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 at the request of the board. There it is, at the request of the board. So that means they get to, so the way we've written this other document that we're looking at, it says that immediately if the chief rejects it, that happens. Instead of shall, at the direction of the board or staff shall place the matter on the council calendar. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, maybe.
So that way we, yeah, give them the
Yeah.
power to a decision.
Yeah, sometimes maybe you're right. The chief will give them a really great reason why the policy recommendation isn't such a good idea. And the board will go, oh, I see what you're saying. And so we don't want it, we're not going to take it to city council because we've come around to your way of thinking, or we're happy to you know what I mean? So you can see some back and forth then. So yeah, that's a good suggestion.
And just one other thing I just wanted to add too, that the time for us to have asked for the board to have the authority to force these decisions would have been before the ballot measure was written. And, you know, that ship has sailed. And so we have a bucket of items that we're asking the city council to consider to make the board stronger, that maybe that can go in there. Commissioner Arce.
So, Commissioner Angie, and then Debbie, we can wordsmith this, I believe. So
Okay.
Commissioner Angie?
Hi, thank you. Maybe putting in if the chief rejects a recommendation or portion of a recommendation, comma, or portion of a recommendation or fails to respond after 60 days. You know, in regards to what Sarah Ames just said. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then I'm trying to remember how Commissioner Dan phrased the or fails to respond with after receive the record. The board.
Commissioner
May
Dan said,
direct- oh, at the direction, right,
right.
of the board, yeah, the staff shall, okay, right, because then if the board doesn't give the direction, then they step back from that particular discussion and move on to other things. So, okay. Are people, how are people feeling about this first paragraph right now? Okay, and then let's and the second, I'm going to read the second paragraph out loud. If the board
Well,
recommends,
let's do
Oh,
the first
sorry.
paragraph first.
okay,
Let's
good.
do
All
that
right,
first. Yep.
good. All right. If the chief rejects a recommendation or a portion of a recommendation or fails to respond within 60 days after receipt of the recommendation, at the direction of the board, the staff shall place the matter on the council calendar within 15 days thereafter for consideration and a decision by city council. Okay, does anybody have any objections to this, the way this is written now?
Staff and then Sophia and then Monica.
I apologize. Earlier, I had clicked and dragged this to the wrong spot. So this actually should say shall within 15 days thereafter place the matter, just to be even clearer. Just wanted to flag that instead of just dragging it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much. And then Commissioner Sophia and then Monica.
Yeah, my question is, if it's placed on the calendar within 15 days after that, do we have any what do I say, some parameters of when it might be? I mean, if it's on the calendar for 6 months later, or is it, you know, how long, how far into the calendar? I know we don't dictate the commissioner's calendar, but I think there should be some reasonable time frame. You know, they could put it on their calendar within 15 days, but it could take a while. That's all. I'm just asking. I'm putting the question out to
Sure.
for
I'm gonna
consideration.
ask staff to comment on that briefly.
I feel like this is something that commissioners will probably need to decide. I don't know that this is something that staff can necessarily provide guidance on. There is a note that a relevant Q&A that may be at least helpful to commissioners as they form an opinion. It is true, just to clarify and confirm a fact here, it is true that something can be put on the council agenda for very far down the line. And there may be, that may be a problem or not. That's the subjective decision of the commission, whether that's a good or bad thing. But it is possible to do so. So it is something that perhaps theoretically could be done by the board staff if that was something you wanted, or something that you could provide a limitation to in this text if you preferred.
So staff, I'm asking, does the board have the ability to say to city council, review this recommendation within the certain amount of time?
I think that's something that city code could provide to clarify 2-1007B. I'm not a lawyer, so this is not a defense, but it seems like that's the sort of thing that would be possible. So yes.
Commissioner Sophia, is that what you were asking? Very good.
Yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Do you have a time frame, Commissioner Sophia, that you'd like to insert in that?
I don't have one specifically, but I would say within, I don't know, I guess the commission goes on quarters, within the first quarter. I don't know. I'm just making something up because I don't know when. I just know maybe a quarterly basis, on the calendar within that quarter or the next quarter or something of that nature. That might be reasonable. I don't know. Just a suggestion.
Thank you. That seems fair enough to me.
So Commissioner Dan says the city council shall consider the recommendations no more than 3 months after it has been presented. Commissioner Sophia, does that work for you? Yes. Commissioner Debbie, does that work for you?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so we're going to ask staff to add that.
Good.
So Commissioner Monica, do you have comment on the first paragraph?
Yeah, I just wanted to take the third recommendation and say, if the chief rejects a recommendation or a portion of a recommendation or fails to respond within 60 days after its receipt, at the direction of the board, and take out the staff, just so take out at the direction of the board, staff shall within 15 days or after place a matter. Does that make sense? So after its receipt, it just takes one recommendation
receipt
out.
We have a lot of recommendations in that.
Yeah,
sentence.
I'm feeling very recommended.
I'd say.
Okay, yep.
Uh-huh.
And then you can delete.
But then cross out of the recommendation.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Done.
And is that right, how it's supposed to be, at the recommendation, at the direction of the board? Staff shall within 15 days thereafter place the matter on the council calendar for consideration and a decision by city council. Okay. All right. So are there any objections to the way the first paragraph is written right now? Is there general agreement with the paragraph as it's written right now?
I see agreement.
Yay. Okay, second paragraph. If the board recommends a change to City of Portland policy, the board or staff shall place the recommended change on the council calendar within 15 days thereafter for consideration and a decision by city council Oh, and then here, there's the rest. The city council shall consider the recommendation no more than 3 months after it has been presented. If the board recommends a change to City of Portland policy, the board or staff shall place the recommended change on the council calendar within 15 days thereafter. Does that say to you that it's going to show up on their schedule sometime within those 15 days? Or does that say to you that they submit it to this council clerk within 15 days? Oh, Commissioner Dan, I see you have a comment right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's the way the IPR code is written, because it could take that long to get the paperwork together and get it into city council clerk.
Okay,
So we should leave it that way. I think that if that last sentence is going to end this section, it should say the city council shall consider either kind of recommendation no more than 3 months after it's been presented.
okay, right.
A city council recommendation and a bureau recommendation.
Okay. Should it say after they have been, after it's been presented? Okay, good. All right, so I'll read that second paragraph again. If the board recommends a change to City of Portland policy, the board or staff shall within 15 days thereafter place the recommended change on the council calendar for consideration and a decision by city council. The city council shall consider either kind of recommendation no more than 3 months after it has been presented. Okay, so any strong objections to the way that last section is written now? Okay, do we have general agreement to accept this the way it's drafted?
I see agreement. Connie, Casey. Yep. Obi, Samir. Very good. Thank you. CMOB. Okay.
Okay, D3 follow-up. If a board recommendation is approved by either PPB or the city council, the board shall have the authority to monitor and enforce full implementation of the recommendation. I'm going to say right now that we talked about a concern that the board really doesn't have the authority to enforce anything. And so thought that we should get rid of enforce. And then I'm going to keep reading though, just so you get the whole deal. This may include continued advocacy, requesting the chief or designee to attend and brief the board, and requesting data or reports from PPB to determine the level of progress towards implementation, or any other action the board feels that is necessary to take. So the first question then is to pursue, oh yes, we want that word pursue in there. Wait a minute, authority to pursue full implementation. That might be better than monitor and enforce. So I welcome if anybody has any comments on that. It could be maybe shall have the authority to pursue full implementation of the recommendation might be the best way to say it, but what do others think?
Yeah, thank you so much, Debbie. Staff and then commissioners.
Thanks. So yeah, the original text at the subcommittee level going into the last meeting of the subcommittee was the board shall pursue or shall have the authority to pursue full implementation of the recommendation. And then there were several proposed changes. Accountability of that was added, then removed. Monitor and enforce was added. Then there was a proposal to go back to pursue, and it sort of ended unresolved in the at the time that the subcommittee referred it. So that's why it looks a little bit messy here. Then separately, there were a couple proposals on how to change it, which we'll get to in just a second. But there were two parts of this that were originally flagged as potentially legal issues, which could be resolved by the proposed changes without necessarily needing the legal. If the group doesn't prefer enforce, then it wouldn't necessarily need to wait on that. But that was one of the two, was the word enforce, not monitor, pursue, none of the rest of it, just enforce. And then the other part was this last phrase of or any other action. So that's where that ended up. And then noting in the sent in, there was a proposed change, and then seeing that there's possible rewording of that as well. So I can put that in the chat just to show it a look, or in the document just to show what that'll look like.
Thank you so much.
Okay, for the sake of discussion, I'm just gonna read this first part. I'm gonna throw out a recommendation and then be happy for people to disagree. Oh, okay. All right, that looks okay. If a board recommendation is approved by either PPB or the city council, the board shall monitor and pursue full implementation of the recommendation. So, does anybody have any objections to that sentence, the way it's written right now? Okay, then I'm going to read the whole paragraph and we'll ask the questions. If a board recommendation is approved by either PPB or the city council, the board shall monitor and pursue full implementation of the recommendation. This may include continued advocacy, requesting the chief or designee to attend and brief the board, and requesting data or reports from PPB to determine the level of progress towards implementation or any other action the board feels is necessary to take. So are there any strong objections to this paragraph the way it's written right now, as revised? Okay, or is there general agreement that this is written in a way that's acceptable to everybody?
I see general agreement.
Okay, thank you. And okay. So can we move on? Oh, no, wait. Oh, Commissioner Sophia has something.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner
Okay.
Sophia.
I had a question, and if you could scroll down to the one before, I just kind of want to play a little bit of a devil's advocate in that last paragraph. I said the city council shall consider either kind of recommendation no more than 3 months after it has been presented. So that means a consider for a decision, or is it just that they need to think about it? So I was just being a little more poignant in that. Do we want them to just consider it? I know I agreed on it, but I was looking at it again and thinking, well, yeah, they consider it, but are we going to have a decision?
I'm going to put a pin in that and not go back.
Okay.
I'd like us to go forward and ask staff to put a pin in D2 and let's finish D3.
Okay. I think, did I get to the point where, oh, here's another hand.
Yes, Christian, Commissioner
sorry.
Christian, and then Commissioner Charlie.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to do a quick time check. It's 8:19.
Yep.
We do have a time set aside at the end to cover officer accountability on the agenda today. So people just keep that in mind as we move forward.
Thank you so
with the thing.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Charlie.
Just a minor little thing there in the last sentence. Or any other action the board feels is necessary to take. That just feels informal or something. I don't know, like it could be worded a little bit better. Or any other action the board feels necessary. Is the is really necessary?
Okay, let me think. Or any other action the board feels needs to be taken? Does that make it better?
No, like just say feels necessary to take.
Okay, feels necessary to take. Or here, or Commissioner Dan has, or the board decides to take, or any other action the board decides to take.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
All right. Good. So now that that's been revised again, is there general agreement that this paragraph is acceptable? Do this. Okay, shall we move on?
Okay, I want to double check on that, Debbie. Did we ask, there's general agreement? Is there strong opposition? The first one is there strong opposition to changing?
Okay. Is there anybody have any strong opposition? Now's your chance.
Now,
Okay.
is there general agreement?
General agreement?
Thank you. Just wanted
Okay.
to be clear on that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Next section. Okay, collective bargaining. The Bureau of Human Resources shall reserve during negotiations with collective bargaining units representing PPB, sworn officers and their supervisors, one seat for a representative chosen by the board from among its own membership, and one seat for the board director or designee. The city attorney shall consult with the oversight board during the collective bargaining process and inform the board as soon as practicable regarding any potential changes to the police contract. So I'm not sure when the board director and designee ended up in there, but the original idea for this was that there would be one person from the board who would be allowed to, there would be one seat at the table from the board at the collective bargaining sessions. At least when I've attended the ones that when they have them open to the public, it doesn't appear to me that there's a huge team from the city. So it seems like asking for 2 seats might be a bit much. So my personal suggestion would be to just have a representative chosen by the board to attend the bargaining sessions. And then we put the second paragraph as sort of like a fallback. If we don't get that, if the board doesn't get that, then the city attorney should be available to consult with the oversight board during the process to keep them up to date. So for discussion, then I'm going to suggest that we go back to just having a representative chosen by the board to have a seat at the table. So how do we say that? One seat for a representative chosen by the board, period. And then if the board wanted to send the board director, they could. If they wanted to send one of their board members, they could. It would be up to the board to decide. So that would be my suggestion. And but now others have things to say.
Yes, Commissioner Sophia, and then Commissioner Angie.
I appreciate you, Debbie, talking about what you've seen in the past about how many people be on the board, but or how many people being present. But I always think it's stronger to have 2. And maybe we could suggest maybe a staff member as well as a board designee, just have I call it some fallback, just in case something comes up. I think we just need to make it a little broader. That's just a suggestion. And I'll just pass it to the next.
Thank you, Commissioner Sophia, Commissioner Angie, and then Monica.
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Sophia. I do not want to soften this language at all. I want us to have as many seats at the table as possible. And if that means 2 people from our board, then that means 2 people from our board. I want us to retain our power. That's all I want to say.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Angie. Commissioner Monica, then Commissioner Charlie.
My worry of having the board director attend the entire collective bargaining process is that board director is going to be wrapped up in this for months and not going to be able to do anything else. If I understand the collective bargaining situation correctly, as it is in my job, for example. So I wouldn't want the board director to be directly, to have to be directly involved with all the collective bargaining. I think that will take away way too much time for them.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Monica. Commissioner Charlie.
This is a general question since I haven't been real involved in the structural part of this phase. Does all these policy recommendations I'm hearing throughout this conflict with the PPA contract? I mean, like, how do they affect each other? And if it has nothing to do with what's been going on here, then you can always give me that answer at some other point. But I guess that's just a concern. I hear all these policy recommendations. I'm wondering, well, what about the PPA?
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask staff to chime in.
So I don't know, that could be interpreted very broadly, but to answer it very narrowly to the section E, generally speaking, in the labor or collective bargaining processes, both or all parties to that are able to sort of choose who represents them. There may be some sort of like limitation on numbers and things like that. So it's not 50 from one side of it and 2 from the other or something like that. But in terms of who those individuals are, the PPA can choose, or PPCOA as the case may be. And then similarly, the city can determine amongst itself who it sends. In terms of the policy changes and all that, you know, if it's in the PPA contract, it's protected under the Public Employees Collective Bargaining Act, which is state law. So all the references that you see to state law encompass the questions about contradicting, you know, when it says to the extent allowable by state law, for example, that would include the parts of that. And I think Sarah Ames may be able to speak to that more if I'm wrong, but that's how Deputy City Attorney Heidi Brown mentioned it to us earlier as well. So
you're saying that would include the PPA contract when you say law?
State law would.
State law.
Yeah, anything that's, you know, obviously the contract could change. It gets renewed and adjusted each time.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Charlie. Commissioner Dan.
Well, I think that if the second paragraph is meant to be a fallback in case they can't have people in there, then we should make it clear that the board can make recommendations about changes to the contract. Well, actually, whether or not it's during the negotiations, you know, the board's authority, you know, ability to make recommendations to City Council shall include recommendations around the contract. That makes sense.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. Commissioner Charlie, is your hand still up from before? Just double checking. Okay, thank you so much. And we are here at a time check at 8:30 staff.
Yeah, just to clarify, I forgot to cover this, the Commissioner Monica had brought this up. The standard practice in this document has been to sort of note when there's delegating, when there's ability to delegate authority. The next phase of work will have structure of the staff. So it may be that there's a policy unit or a collective bargaining team within the staff. And so the or designee which is not currently in there. In a moment, you'll need to decide if you want to add it. That would allow for that individual not necessarily to be there, but it's still to be a staff member. And again, staff report directly to the board in the new structure. Yeah, thank you. And I see the recommendation from Commissioner Dan in the chat. We'll add that in a moment.
Very good. So Commissioner Debbie.
So going back to the first paragraph and hearing that there's a desire to have more than one seat, how about if it says up to 2 seats for representatives chosen by the board? And just leave it like that. And that way or it'll be up to the board if they want to send one person, two people, if they want to send one board member, one staff member, they can.
So Debbie, I appreciate the change, but we have to vote on designee first, right? We have to,
Okay. Well, what if but if we're gonna get rid of the, we can vote on that, and then we can vote to take it out if,
Mhm.
okay, sounds good. So, how do people, are there strong objections to having designee be in the, in that paragraph at the beginning? I have a strong objection.
okay. So then you can change.
So then what happens next?
You can change it.
Okay, so then my suggestion is that we take that, all the stuff at the end out and say, one seat for up to 2 representatives chosen by the board.
So you want just 1 seat or do you want 2 seats?
Oh, I said, oh, for up to 2 seats.
Yes, up to 2 seats.
Yeah. And that acknowledges the desire among some to have, to have a better representation.
Thank you, staff.
So this would leave that decision up to the Bureau of Human Resources of how many seats the board gets. Because it says the BHR, the Bureau of Human Resources shall reserve up to
2 seats. Well, so to me, that means 2 seats would be reserved for people from either the board or whoever the board chooses amongst the staff to represent the group.
Right, just the way that the sentence is worded, having up to means that it would, if that's the intention, then there's no concern. It's up to the
Well,
commission.
so how would you write it so that it's the board's decision?
You could remove up to.
Okay.
Right, 2 seats.
Okay, 2 seats, okay.
I'm gonna mention that Commissioner Sophia has a suggestion on the chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, so at least 2 seats or no less than 2 seats. I see Charlie's hand and yes, okay, very good. Thank you so much, Victoria. I appreciate that. I didn't see that. So Commissioner Debbie, there's a couple of suggestions in the chat.
Okay, hold on, let me look. Okay, so let's see. We have up to at least 2 or no less than 2. So right now it says at least 2. So does that satisfy people? I'm going to read it the way it's written right now. The Bureau of Human Resources shall reserve during negotiations with collective bargaining units representing PPB sworn officers and their supervisors at least 2 seats for representatives chosen by the board. Okay, are there any strong objections to that the way it's written? Is there general agreement that this is acceptable?
I see general agreement.
Okay. Then we'll read the last bit now. Oh, then, so I just wonder if, to make it clear that this second option about the city attorney, it is sort of like a fallback, if we should say as an alternative, the city attorney shall consult with the oversight board during the collective bargaining process and inform the board as soon as practicable regarding any potential changes to the police contracts. The board's ability to make recommendations shall include proposals for the collective bargaining contracts. So are there any reactions to the idea of putting as an alternative at the beginning of that section, so that it's clear that we prefer the seats at the table, but if we don't get the seats at the table, this is the backup plan.
Commissioner Angie and then Commissioner Sophia. And then
Um,
staff.
I do not prefer as an alternative. I'm okay with keeping it the way it was. I know that it is an alternative, but I like it the way that it was.
Okay,
Commissioner Sophia, just want to hear you say it.
Oh, I put it in the chat. I was like, I think that we should always have that included. Not as a fallback, but even in addition to, we should be able to consult with the oversight board during the collective bargaining. I mean, why wouldn't we want to do it? Even if we do have people at the table, we would want to be able to do that consultation, right? All
okay,
right.
good. All right, so are there any strong so remove as an alternative, and then with the way it was, and then that added sentence at the end, is there any strong objection to this the way it's written right now? Okay, is there general agreement that this is satisfactory?
I see general agreement.
Okay, can we move on?
So I have to go to staff at the moment, like we're getting close to the end. Yes?
Yeah, so there are 3 sections left, F, G, and H. G has 2 subsections, which we'll get to in just a moment. F and H are just 1 paragraph each. We are getting close to the end of time, and it would be helpful to at least be able to introduce the next document. So, setting aside perhaps the wordsmithing part of it, if there's, commas or anything like that, we can definitely handle the small scale things after, but just wanted to flag those. And then in terms of things that were pre-flagged, there's only 2 items under G1, and nothing else has been pre-flagged, and that's it for this document. So can move on and do F and then G2 and H relatively quickly, hopefully, and take a little time on G1.
Okay, that sounds great.
Okay, so we're going to carry on with this. All right.
Yeah.
F, PPB budget review. The oversight board may facilitate a public review of PPB proposed budget requests before its official submission and receive public comment to transmit to PPB and the city council. Okay, are there any questions or concerns about this particular section?
Do I see your hand, Commissioner Dan?
That's not a concern. I just want to note that during the subcommittee meeting, a member of the public raised the question that doesn't our commission know there are other advisory bodies that advise the police about the budget, but I think that certain kinds of people will come to the board, and so I don't think it's bad for the Bureau to hear recommendations from multiple sources.
Okay, thank you. So I forgot if I asked, are there any strong objections to this the way it's written? And then is there general agreement that this little section here is satisfactory?
I see agreement.
Okay, shall we move on? Oversight of accountability systems. Review of deadly force investigations. The board shall hire a qualified staff member, team, or independent expert to review closed investigations pertaining to officer-involved shootings and deaths in custody on an ongoing basis. This is, and I'm just a side note, this is similar to what happens now where they have this group called the OIR group that they're outside experts. They come in, they review closed cases of shootings and deaths in custody, and they analyze the whole thing and then make recommendations. The completed review shall be described in periodic reports available to the public and include case and investigative summaries, policy implications, recommendations for improvements in police and oversight board policies or practices. The Portland Police Bureau shall respond to recommendations related to PPB, and the board or designee shall address any policy-related or quality of investigation issues that warrant further review. The report shall be presented to the city council with contemporaneous public testimony allowed. Are there any? Do I need to ask? Oh, sorry, I see.
Commissioner, yes, Commissioner Charlie has question.
Regarding the independent expert, or team or whatever, are we cautious not to have any prior cops on there? Or police, other police employee, employees?
It seems like if it's the new agency, I think I feel like, I forgot if it's in the charter that it says that there can't be former police officer. That's not for the staff, I don't think. I think that might just be for the board members, but I can't remember for sure. And then as far as the independent experts, when they're reviewing you ask for proposals, and when you're reviewing the proposals, you'll see who the experts are. And if the board decides that they don't want anybody who's a former police officer on the team, then they can filter out any proposals with people related to law enforcement. So I think that, I think hopefully that can be avoided.
Commissioner Sophia.
Yes, thank you. I was just looking at the first paragraph and wondering if we should make that plural, because it kind of sounds like a staff member. Can we have more than one staff member? Do we have to have one independent expert? If we can kind of generalize it a little more to be maybe more than one, that would just seem like a better fit. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Sophia. I think, I'm sorry, Commissioner Debbie.
Yes.
You can ask for general agreement with these changes, with all of these changes.
In this particular, okay. Is there
Yes.
a general agreement to the changes that have been proposed to this section? Great. Do your hands if there is.
Beautiful.
Okay, now I can say, can we move on?
Yep.
Okay, can we move on? Next is continual improvement. The board shall ensure a qualified staff member, team, or independent expert examine oversight board performance, the charter, city code, and board policies, protocols on an ongoing basis. The board may make recommendations for improvement to the appropriate decision-making bodies. Thank you for those fixes on the language on the first line. Are there any questions or concerns about this section? Is there general agreement that the wording is acceptable on this? Okay.
Yes.
I think maybe we're getting close to the end. Okay, and then H, board proposals related to federal or state law. The board may officially endorse legislation or policy ideas and shall have the authority to testify in front of relevant government bodies and communicate its policy positions with employees and elected officials at any level of government. The Office of Government Relations, which is the city's kind of lobbying department, shall consult directly with the board as part of its development of the city's legislative agenda in a manner equivalent to any top-level administrative division of the city government. Are there any questions or concerns about this paragraph? Okay, is there general agreement that this is acceptable?
I see.
Yay. All right. I think that's the end.
Yay, staff.
Yeah, there were two things that you asked to put a pin in and go back to. And then after that, we can probably move into the last step here. One of them, I have to find it, apologies. And the other was on this last sentence of D2. Commissioner Sophia had something, and then I'll find the other one after that. I don't want to scroll around while you're reading this.
Correct. Thank you so much. So Commissioner Sophia, you had a suggestion.
Yes, I was asking a question for the group to consider as, do we want to say in this last, this is shall consider no more than 3 months after? Do we want a decision as well? Or we just want them to consider it? That was my question. I want a decision, but I just wanted to pose that to the group to see what they thought.
I personally think it's fine to put a time limit on.
Commissioner Christian.
Thank you. Yeah, I would not be opposed to adding a language for having a decision made by that time as well. House shall consider and hold a vote. I see Casey, Commissioner Lewis, just put a suggestion in the chat. That sounds good to me.
Commissioner Debbie, do you like the shall consider and hold a vote? And Commissioner.
Yeah, shall I, you want me to just read that sentence again and then where did it go? Okay. Okay, the city council shall consider and hold a vote on either kind of recommendation no more than 3 months after it has been presented. Are there any strong objections to that? Is there general agreement to that improvement?
I see agreement.
And even better news, the other thing was a garden plot item, not a circle back. So, yeah. I think we can pass it over to the slides again.
So we're going to slide 16. Potential agreement. The commission has completed discussion on the document. And next on the agenda is discussing whether the commission should approve the draft areas of agreement with all the changes we've made today incorporated into the text. There's a potential agreements document that was circulated that gives some context to this decision. Before seeing if there's consensus around approving this document, we're going to hear from the public. After that, we will review the PAC values and goals. Finally, we'll ask if members want to make any final tweaks and then ask if they are ready to make a decision. Slide, yes, public comment. We ask members of the public to keep their comments to 2 minutes in length and keep their comments focused on the draft document. You can raise your hand in Zoom when you'd like to be called on. I do not see any people raising their hands. Okay, so then we will now briefly look at the PAC values and goals as a reference for this document. On March 24, the PAC adopted the values and goals. And as part of the decision, the PAC agreed to use the PAC values and goals as a reference point on future PAC decisions to ensure that all future decisions align with the values and goals. The values are on the screen. We're going through. Number 1 is equity and inclusion. Number 2 is anti-racism. Number 3 is harm reduction. Number 4 is transparency and trustworthiness. And number 5 is community-centered. And number 6 is continual effectiveness. Would any members of the commission like to revisit any portion of the draft areas of agreement? I am not seeing any. So is there any strong opposition to approving the draft areas of agreement with all the changes we've made today incorporated into the text as the Police Accountability Commission areas of agreement on structural oversight? Is there general agreement around approving this document? Thank you, Christian. There is consensus, and this is approved.
Thank you, everybody. Yay.
Thank you so much for all the work, Debbie. Thank you. And for the, and for Faith and co-chair Faith, and that was a lot of work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yes. Okay, it's 8:52. Where to next? Yes.
So we're gonna give a quick run through of the next document.
Thank you.
And just the flow chart part of it, and I think co-chairs Charlie and Dan have so to say. I'll screen share here. If that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Co-chairs Dan and Charlie.
Right, so we have a long presentation on this flow chart that we're going to give you at the next meeting. But I want really, before you look at the whole, I don't know how many page document it is now, that has our full outline of what's going to happen from the time an incident happens to the time an officer is disciplined or not. This is just the quick flow chart, which was initially created by Commissioner Aiken, and I really want to continue to thank her for that. So staff, if you can just zoom in on the left side without the right side being seen, that would be great. Yeah, I'm all right. Everything begins when an incident happens, then a complainant is created from that incident and assigned an advocate, which is a really important thing we'll talk about a lot later next time. Wow, that's really small now. Right. So then there's a preliminary investigation, and then there are 4 possible branches of what happens during the preliminary investigation or after it. But generally speaking, the next step, let's scroll down. The purple block is a full investigation, and that full investigation, we actually think there's part of that isn't actually written into our outline, the dismissal part. So either it's investigated solely by the board investigators, or there could be a parallel criminal investigation that's going on if there's a potential crime committed by the officer. Next, not sure what the color is, the other purple section. The investigators create an investigative report. It goes to a hearings panel, which we envision being part of the board, not necessarily the full board. The preliminary hearing that leads to a full hearing, and then they can either substantiate or not substantiate the allegations. If there are non-substantiated allegations, the complainant may want to appeal. We're not going to go over to the appeal right now, thanks. But yeah, there's a whole section about the appeals, but then it goes to the discipline process, which is the red section here. And then the officer gets a number of avenues to appeal, 3 of which are not within our control. So, but I don't know if you can zoom back out again and show the flow chart broadly. And so you all have this document. You can look at it in more detail. So I wish I could point to this for you. But so just that left side, that's the flow. The incident, the preliminary investigation, the full investigation, the hearing, and the discipline. Then on the right side, we have the green section, which is about what happens if a police officer complains about another police officer. And we want to give them 2 options. They can either go through whatever internal process there is. Right now, it's internal affairs, or they can go to the board. And then down lower on to that branch side is the appeal, where there are 3 possible outcomes for the appeals, which is that things could change, things could not change, or they could send it back for more investigation and then make those decisions. And then if there's a sustained finding or a out of policy finding following the appeal, it'll go to the discipline process. So that is the very, very brief and Dan Handelman, quick talking version of that flow chart for you to look at for next for Thursday. And I do invite you to send us comments beforehand if you want to, so we can flag stuff for discussion ahead of time. Anything you want to add, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley?
If we had more time.
Yeah, I agree. I hear you.
Not at this time.
Thank you so much for that invitation in, for that hard work that you've done creating this flow chart. It's really critical to understanding the next steps and making sure that there's clarity. So looking forward to all of the commission's feedback on this document, on the flow chart, as well as the big document that Dan and Charlie are going to present. So I would like to take us into next steps. Thank you. And those next steps, staff or member curiosities, yes. Don't really have that much time for member curiosities, but would open it up for like a minute.
Yeah, sorry. Feel free, everyone, to share anything that you want to from today's agenda. We're not going to be deciding anything. And yeah, let's take just a quick minute. Commissioner Co-Chair Handelman.
Thank you. As a commissioner, I reviewed the quarterly report, which I think is going to be on the City Council agenda on the 15th of February at this point. My suggestion was to pull up our letter asking for the city to adjust our timeline to the top so that people don't get burned out by having so many meetings. We've already lost 8 members of the commission over the first 13 months of our process, and I think it would be good for the City Council to give us a little bit more time so we can do this a thorough and complete job without burning ourselves out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to go into phase of work transition tasks at this moment.
So just going to quickly run through and mention nothing for today that we're actually going to do, but for coming up meetings, there'll be the conversations around subcommittees and co-chairs, both of the full commission and of whatever subcommittees end up happening for the next phase of work. There'll be an email going out to members asking you to throw your hat in for various co-chairship candidacies. I don't know if that's the right word, co-chairship, but whatever it may be. Please, respond to that. Please consider it. Whatever the subcommittees are, they're going to need some great co-chairs next phase of work for the structure and details phase. And then the sort of other part of that is that the transition is both the incoming phase, which is what I just talked about, and then the outgoing phase, which remains to have one. There's still one outcome document that needs to get resolved, which is the the draft areas of agreement on officer accountability. So as co-chairs Dan and Charlie just said, it will benefit immensely from having members read and respond with any recommendations or proposed changes and track changes or comments. That document will be recirculated so that members can do that before Thursday's meeting. And if the Thursday meeting is able to finish the document, then there won't need to be a public meeting next Monday, the 13th. And then the commission would get one additional day without a meeting somewhere, either that day or another point during the month. So as we talk about, ensuring that there's not burnout for all of you who put in so much time and effort as volunteers, that is not the only way to get some space and some time on the calendar, but it is something that is happening. So just wanted to flag that as well. And I guess as part of that, congratulations once again to the full membership of the subcommittee on structural oversight, in particular, co-chairs Debbie and Faith. And also congratulations to the subcommittee on officer accountability, who hit a huge milestone in referring this document this past Thursday. So yeah, and I will pass it back over to facilitators. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The garden plot is a time for co-chairs, facilitators, and staff to bring up items that are for the future. Any items, staff?
Yeah, two. Sorry, I just spoke, handed it back, and you handed it back. So one of them is the possibility of requiring participation in Sentinel event reviews. If and when the document on access to information is revisited. And the other one, somewhere in the, it has to do with the reporting process as part of ensuring the ability of the oversight board to conduct the monitoring and pursuing full implementation. That's in D3 of the document that was just reported, possibly adding an additional corresponding line to the access to information document with relation to the regular reporting requests from the oversight board to PPB. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Victoria.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. I don't have anything in the garden plot. Thank you.
Thank you. Co-chairs. Nope.
I don't have anything in particular. I do want to say thank you to everyone for the work today. It's really great that we got that document approved. And as a member of the one that's coming this Thursday, it is substantially longer. So do mentally prepare yourself for that. And do look at overview of time, please, because it will help both you and us as a whole. You will thank yourself later. Thank you.
Very good. That being said, then our next move is to say this is thank you to everyone. As a reminder, you can submit advanced public comment to the Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or post-mail, as you can see on the screen. Thank you to all of our members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions today. Thank you also to the interpreters. The next slide, please. And finally, thank you so much to the members of the community for attending and contributing your questions and your thoughts. If you have not already signed up for email updates, please also sign up to receive updates from the PAC. It is now 9:03 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.